Welcome to Exploring Fredericton Homes. I'm Chris Turner.
And I'm Trevor Thurrett.
In this episode, we are going to explore homelessness in Fredericton.
It's become such an issue that the Fredericton homeless shelters have had to open a temporary winter space.
In this part of the episode, Maria Hanna is going to interview Warren Maddox.
So can you just tell me a little bit about where we're standing right now?
We are standing in the middle of the small craft aquatic center, which we rent from the city of Fredericton. This is called a Band-Aid, which is really what it is. The space is very temporary. It'll be down by the end of April. It is to minimize the negative impact of winter on an individual. Sadly, we probably need another one. I would suggest there should probably be one on the north side.
So who exactly are we helping in this city?
We're helping probably the most vulnerable people in our society. People that have a drug addiction, people that are the ones that are terribly sad are the ones with a really significant mental health illness. Mm-hmm. We're helping abused women, we're helping vets, we're helping our Indigenous friends and neighbors. We're helping your sister or your mom, mm-hmm. We're helping your dad or your brother. Last year our success rate was 99.7%. Throughout this whole process you have this amazing staff that are trauma informed, that are trained, well trained. We have our own in-house mental health counselor that we pay for. Our mission is to take someone from that crisis, move them as quickly as we can, as quickly as they can, mm-hmm. into housing.
So you had talked about the team that you have.
Yep.
Can you tell me about kind of the fundamentals of your team?
The overall organization is really built, the front line, the transition planners, a couple of managers for each of the shelters, mm-hmm. Our mental health counselor, our prevention and diversion worker. We also are the host agency for something called the By Name List. And then there's 3 of us in administration that take care of all the revenue streams and all the money and that sort of stuff. We're a bit understaffed in many areas, so it's a busy spot.
How many locations would you have under your organization?
There's the 2 main shelters, so St. John House, which is just back here by the Victoria Health Center, Grace House, which is down on Brunswick Street, and then transitional spaces. There's Brunswick Home, where part of it is our administration office and the rest are transitional spaces. We have an apartment on York Street, and then we own 2 apartment buildings on Aberdeen.
So how long do people typically come and stay?
So it really can range anywhere from something short and quick, like a vet, for example, can be in and out in a week, to other individuals that we've worked with significant mental health issues. And I think the longest one we've had on that front was 18 months.
Who exactly would fund this organization?
That's the cool part. We're government supported, which I think is a great way of saying it. So we have federal programs, we have provincial programs. But in terms of who else, there's Ruby, who was 4.5 years old in the middle of the pandemic, that did a bike-a-thon in her living room and raised $1,500. So we have everything from little tiny kids right up to seniors groups and everything in the middle, foundations, businesses, churches, everybody has an interest in it. And it's refreshing to see actually the number of children that are engaged and want to do something. The McCain Foundation are a wonderful supporter of ours, but the Windsor Foundation, the Wilson Family Foundation, the John Clark Family Foundation. So a lot of different foundations, businesses that will queue up, everything from RBC to Caldwell.
Really the community coming together, and I think that this is why this is so important to bring light to your organization and to show people, and maybe they want to participate and help out, but how do they do that?
The way to get involved is to put support toward organizations that are actually trying to do something that makes that difference. So us, John Howard, are 2 sort of the very front lines of trying to solve this. John Howard have the outreach, which is, if you look at the continuum and the sheltered door, John Howard has the outreach here. We have the housing supports at this end. So the 2 organizations are really very much sister organizations in terms of our alignment, but support organizations that are doing stuff. And we're doing more and more work up along the River Valley, building connections up along that way. So it's critical that we get the funding that we need to be able to build buildings or buy buildings and apartment buildings and build, but as well to continue to do the programming that we do, which we know works.
So as your residents maintain that independence and gain that independence back, what does that relationship look like with them?
It's really critical for a number of reasons, and one is to make sure that they stay. So that's when our housing support team take over, and there's two of them, Darren and Jess, who are brilliant at what they do. And they'll stop in, once they make that sort of move out of the shelter and into their own housing, Darren and Jess will be there 2-3 times a week. Just, how's she going? Do you need anything? Are you getting settled in? How you doing lonely-wise? Because one of the biggest things with shelters, you're coming out of this really communal space, and suddenly you're on your own. Mm-hmm. Like no one's around you anymore. Mm-hmm. So loneliness is a thing. So we're stopping in 2 or 3 times a week for the first month. And then that'll go down to a couple times a week. And then it goes to once a week. And then once every 2 weeks. And then once a month. And then by the end of the year, they're done.
So when you talk about, like, do you need anything and checking in, what about clothing? What about food? Mm-hmm. Where does that typically come from?
Clothing and toiletries, housewares would all come from us. Food would come from either Greener Village or the kitchen, mostly Greener Village. Oromocto are brilliant. The Oromocto Food Bank are wonderful people, and they support us as well, or support our residents. So that's really where our connections are to the community with those core partners in terms of making sure that no one's going hungry, that they get proper clothing, that they have proper toiletries, that they have proper house maintaining supplies. So we also do a lot of support in terms of people that are out in the community. They're housed, but they can't get ends to meet. Mm-hmm. So they're in jeopardy of losing their housing, or they're in jeopardy of going hungry. So we spend a fair amount of money each year supporting them. So we'll get calls saying, I can't make my rent this month. Great, we'll help you. Or I don't have enough money to pay fuel, or I don't have enough money to pay the power bill. Fine, we'll help you out. But what's your plan in the future of trying to deal with this? So that process is really strong, and we spend a lot of time working with our Indigenous friends in the community up from here right on up the River Valley.
Welcome back to Exploring Fredericton Homes.
In this part of the show, we're going to learn the importance of the Fredericton Community Kitchens.
We spoke with Executive Director Cassandra LeBlanc on the challenges of serving warm and healthy meals to those without a home.
So with an organization this big, so you would have volunteers, you would have board members, you would have staff, how many people are involved with the community kitchens?
About 9 staff members, and most of those are full-time. We have 2 part-time positions. And then we depend on over 400 volunteers. So each day, just at this location, we would depend on about 20 volunteers. And then at the Student Hunger Program, we would depend on another 5 to 10 volunteers. And we operate almost every day, so you do the math. It takes quite an army of people to manage what we do here at the community kitchens.
So you mentioned the Student Hunger Program. So tell me about that initiative. How does that work?
That program started because a concerned teacher at Leo Hayes High School, some of you may know her, Kim McDonald. She doesn't work at Leo Hayes anymore, but she spearheaded the effort, started to feed the lions, and then approached the community kitchens about the need for lunches. At the time, she thought there might be a need for about 60 lunches a day. Fast forward to today, we work with over 20 schools in the Fredericton area, and we provide daily lunches. We do about 330 lunches per day now, and we prepare them and deliver them to each school. And we also do a weekly backpack program where we provide backpacks full of non-perishables that students can take home to their families over the weekend.
In the kitchen here, there's tables set up. How many people would come through the doors? How many meals, I guess, would you serve in the run of a day, run of a week?
Typically, this program, we call it our daily meal program. So for those who aren't familiar, we offer 3 meals a day, Monday through Friday, 2 meals a day, Saturday and Sundays. We're open 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We never close. unless there's a storm coming and we literally can't get in to make the meals. We really try to always be open no matter what. So in the run of a day, we would see probably about 400 plus meals go out the door just from this location. Last year we had 130,000 meals prepared in this kitchen alone. And as an organization overall, we did over 198,000 meals to the Fredericton community in 2023.
So what would be some of the bigger challenges that an organization this big would face?
Funding and space. So funding is very interesting.
Wow.
So less than 2% of our operating budget comes from government funding. We do get special funding for, certain projects, and, everyone likes to fund equipment, but getting funding for operational is very difficult. So we do a lot of fundraising. We write a grant for pretty much anything we are eligible for. We write a grant for it. We did ask for corporate and business sponsorship and donations. We asked the community for donations. We got our funding from so many different sources, and a lot of times it can be one time. So it's really hard to plan. It's hard to be able to hire staff even when we need it, because our funding is so variable. Our other big challenge is space. We're not blind to the fact that moving this kind of service into another area of the city would be challenging, but this building doesn't serve our needs. Our dining room needs to be about twice the size it is. If you come volunteer here during a meal service, especially lunch and supper, you'll see that absolutely every seat in this dining room is full, and we're now at the point that even in the winter, guests are sometimes eating outside because there's no space in the dining room.
And your volunteers, would they be a lot of businesses coming in as a group, or is it a lot of individuals that come in to volunteer?
It's a wonderful mix. So I'll just mention, pre-pandemic, a lot of our volunteers were seniors, which makes a lot of sense. So some of our shifts are in the middle of the day during a work day. But during the pandemic, a lot of our senior volunteers had to step away due to the risk of coming and helping here. And at the time, university students were doing a lot of online courses and weren't going to school as much. So we saw a huge influx of university students. So we have a nice mix now of university and younger volunteers mixed with older volunteers. And then, like you said, we get so many amazing businesses that are so supportive of their staff volunteering. That we have a slew of different businesses and church groups and service clubs that commit to various shifts throughout the month, and we truly depend on all of that to make what happens here happen.
So for those who are able to make a donation, how would they go about doing so?
So there's a couple of different ways you can help. If you want to make a financial donation, you can donate on our website, super easy peasy. You can e-transfer, and I'd be happy to share that email with you. You can send us a check. You can drop off cash. We're open 7 days a week, so you can stop by anytime and drop off a donation. And we also have donors that will, give us investments as well. So we also can receive shares and investments as a donation. So that's also a way people can give. And then you can give food.
I will say, from the time, I haven't volunteered here in a while, but I used to do it a lot. I was always super impressed with what the kitchen staff could do to make very impressive meals, working on such a minute allowance of, craft dinner and Rice Krispies, and making crazy meals in the back for everybody. It was always so impressive.
Yeah, it's a big part of what we're proud of here at the community kitchen. So there's no set menu here at the daily meal program. Our chefs actually love that. They talk about how they have a lot of freedom to be creative and to really make each meal their own. So we do purchase food on a regular basis, but we also supplement it with a lot of donations received from the community. We also pick up from a lot of grocery stores in town every single day. So we take all those donations, we see what we have, and we see what we purchased, and we come up with a beautiful meal.
Cassandra, do you ever think services like this could be utilized just on the north side? Would that alleviate the problem if you were able to divide the kitchen, or is it better to have everything in one central location?
It would be great to be able to have a location on the north side because there are a lot of homeless people that live on the north side, and there's a lot of low-income people that live on the north side that could use the service and right now have to travel across the river to come to us. But it really just comes down to funding.
Given the last few years with inflation and the way the economy has been changing, how has that put an impact on the community kitchens?
It has put a big strain on the community kitchens and on me to bring in that funding and on my board of directors. We have experienced the grocery inflation. As I mentioned, we purchase, I think last year was about $250,000 in groceries. So that keeps increasing every year. The number of people we're serving has drastically increased. So we're just seeing increasing happening in each one of our programs. We've got grocery inflation happening, and we do a lot of grocery purchasing. And then also we have to remember our staff. The Community Kitchens has a strong belief that staff members working in an organization to alleviate poverty shouldn't also be living in poverty. So all of our costs have gone up, the demand has gone up. Thankfully, the community has come out in support, and there has been a lot of emergency funding available.
Welcome back to Exploring Fredericton Homes. I'm Chris Turner.
And I'm Trevor Thurrett.
In this part of the show, we're going to talk about the John Howard Society and its importance to those in need in Fredericton.
They have several key programs, including the coldest night of the year, which happens later this month in Fredericton and all across the country.
So Tim, tell me a little bit about what the John Howard Society does.
Certainly, one of the things that we do is we work with folks experiencing homelessness. We provide homes to those folks. We have a shelter program as well. We run a variety of youth programs, youth intervention programs here. And we also run the CHIMO helpline, and we're responsible for 988 service as well in the community.
So you mentioned 988. What is that?
So 988 is a brand new program. It's across the whole country, and it is the number you call to reach suicide prevention crisis helpline.
Okay, and how does that differentiate from CHIMO?
So CHIMO is sort of the local version of that. So CHIMO is there. CHIMO will handle things outside of suicide prevention,
Okay.
But they are very closely tied in. And 988 is a number you can call from anywhere in the country, whereas you would have to dial our CHIMO number if you were here to reach CHIMO.
I see. Okay, and that's not limited to youth. You had mentioned youth as well. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. And 988 is for anybody across the country.
Tell me a bit about the youth program then.
Youth program, we have a whole variety of different youth programs. So we have a Youth Options Center program. That program works with young people who are unemployed, not in school, but are eligible to work. And we put them in class for 12 weeks. So they do classes with us,
Okay.
not in school, but with us. So they go to school for us for 12 weeks. They learn a whole variety of different life skills and work skills. And then they have 4 weeks of on-the-job training after that. And we've had a lot of success with kids who have gone through the program and then have either gone back to school, graduated, or who have gone out and got work.
You mentioned kids in school and them getting connected. How do they connect, and is it through social workers or who is connecting them?
Yeah, so it depends really on the program. Often the school will identify clients for us that should probably be in some of our programs. At other times it's the police force that will identify those people, and we work closely with the Fredericton Police.
You continually talk about here, but I think you have multiple locations. How many different locations do you have in town?
We own 5 different buildings in Fredericton, and we've got programs going on in many of the buildings. Some buildings are housing buildings. The vast majority, in fact all 5 of our buildings have housing in them as well, because that's a huge component of what we do.
Yeah, you had mentioned that earlier about finding people homes, and so how does your organization tie in with homelessness, and have you seen an increase with the tent cities? And with homelessness in the city, have you seen an increase of demand?
Yeah, there's been a huge increase in demand. We last fiscal year, we housed and supported 85 individuals, and that's not shelter, that's housing. So that's a housing model where people are put in an actual home.
So tell me about how you got started with the John Howard Society yourself.
So I've been officially on the payroll for about a year and a half, but I did some volunteer work before that time, and I know we said there's not a lot of volunteer work to be done, but the one area where there is volunteer work is with Coldest Night of the Year. So it's our annual fundraiser that we do. I've always appreciated the work of the organization and the fact that like we're providing real homes to people. And I think that's really the key to ending homelessness. We know that the housing first model works. We've seen how countries like Finland's the only country in the EU where homelessness is on a decrease, and they're looking to eradicate homelessness by 2027. In a country of 5.5 million people, there's only 3,000 people living in the streets. And that's because they use a housing first model, and it's the exact same model that we use at the John Howard Society.
And so you mentioned Coldest Night of the Year. I'd love for you to tell me more about that.
On February 24th, it happens in 234 locations across Canada and the United States, and it goes to help charities that are supporting people who are experiencing hurt, hunger, and homelessness. And so we'll be doing that right here in Fredericton on February 24th.
So you mentioned there's not necessarily volunteers for the John Howard Society itself, but you did mention that people could volunteer for Coldest Night of the Year. So tell us how they would go about that.
Yeah, so you go to cnoy.org. That's the same place where you can sign up to walk and fundraise for us, but it's got a section there, volunteer, and you just click on there and you can register to volunteer. And we need hardy folks who are willing to stand out in the cold for an hour or two. Probably two, if I'm being honest. Stand out in the cold and just direct the walkers and make sure everybody's good and check on their health and so on and so forth.
But it's not overnight. It's not something where they've got to commit ridiculous hours. So 2 hours
right
during the daytime.
That's right. Yeah. So the event runs from 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock, but the walk doesn't start till 5. Usually the walk is wrapped up by about 6, so it's about an hour, but you're out there probably a half an hour on either side of that, so 2 hours in the cold, standing out and helping direct people. Yeah, and then everybody comes back and we share a nice meal of soup and some goodies, and everybody heads back home to their nice warm places, and hopefully it puts in their mind a little bit, gives them a little empathy for what people are going through.
So you mentioned multiple programs that you're working with, and one of them was Housing First. So tell me about that.
The idea is that you don't have to earn your housing. You don't have to be ready for your housing. Take somebody who is experiencing homelessness, you put them in a home first, and then you wrap the services around them while they're in a home, because it gives them the best opportunity to be able to deal with the various issues that they're dealing with in their lives, and gives them a safe, secure place to call their home.
What would you say is the one thing that your charity would need the most?
We could really use more addictions and mental health workers to work with the clientele that we're dealing with right now, that we serve, because so many of the clients are physically ill, mentally ill, and are dealing with addictions. And so I would say that's the primary thing, that and housing. We need to be able to build more homes, a lot more homes, and that goes across the whole country.